The Shadow Guild had never failed a contract in 3,000 years. Their headquarters sat hidden in the asteroid belt of the Zarthan system, a massive station carved from dark rock that absorbed light like a hungry void. Inside the main chamber, Guildmaster Krell coiled his serpentine body around his command throne, his yellow eyes fixed on the holographic display before him. The contract was simple enough. The Zephrian Empire wanted the leadership of a new species eliminated. These humans had spread beyond their home world and refused to bow to imperial authority. They had ignored 3 formal demands for submission and continued expanding into space that belonged to the Empire. Emperor Vexar had grown tired of their defiance. Krell studied the data files on humanity. They were a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. Their technology was primitive compared to most galactic civilizations. Their ships were slow and their weapons basic. By all measurements, they should pose no threat to anyone, least of all to the Shadow Guild's finest assassins. He called for Mordith, his most experienced operative. The Krillian warrior entered the chamber with silent steps, his 4 arms folded. Across his armored chest, blue patterns glowed softly under his dark skin, a sign of his enhanced neural modifications. Mordith had completed over 300 contracts without a single failure. The humans, Krell said, sliding the datapad across his desk. Standard leadership elimination. The Emperor wants their military commanders and government officials removed within 1 lunar cycle. Mordith picked up the pad and scrolled through the information. His blue patterns flickered as he absorbed the details. Minutes passed in silence. The patterns under his skin began to pulse faster, which Krell recognized as a sign of agitation. "I decline this contract," Mordith said finally. Krell's head snapped up, his neck extending to its full length. In all his years leading the guild, no assassin had ever refused a standard contract. "Explain yourself." "These humans are not what they appear to be," Mordith replied. He set the datapad down and activated a holographic display. "I have studied their combat records. They do not fight like other species." The display showed footage from human conflicts. Soldiers charging into certain death to save wounded comrades. Ships ramming into larger vessels rather than retreating. Civilians turning everyday objects into weapons when their homes were threatened. "They do not surrender," Mordith continued. "Even when facing impossible odds, they continue fighting. They use tactics that make no logical sense, but somehow work. They turn their own weaknesses into advantages." Krell watched the footage with growing unease. In one clip, a human soldier with a broken leg crawled across a battlefield to reach a communications device, calling in artillery strikes on his own position to stop an enemy advance. In another, civilians defended their colony by rigging mining equipment to explode, taking down attackers twice their size. "This is not normal warrior behavior," Mordith said. "Most species fight to achieve victory or to minimize losses. Humans fight as if they have already accepted death and simply want to make it count for something." "They are primitive," Krell argued. "Their weapons are basic, their armor weak." "Primitive weapons in the hands of primitive minds. Yes," Mordith agreed. "But these are not primitive minds. They are minds that see possibilities where others see limitations. They turn metal scraps into bombs, farming tools into weapons, and desperation into strength." Krell dismissed Mordith and called for other assassins. Surely his most experienced operative was being overly cautious. The guild had eliminated species far more advanced than humans. Zalara, a phase-shifting Vorthik, entered next. She could walk through solid matter and had never been detected during a mission. Krell offered her the contract. "No," she said immediately after reviewing the files. "I have heard stories about these humans from other operatives in the outer systems. They are unpredictable. They do not follow normal patterns of behavior. What stories? Krell demanded. A smuggler told me about a human merchant ship that was boarded by pirates. Instead of surrendering their cargo, the humans depressurized their own ship and fought the pirates in vacuum, using improvised weapons. Half the crew died, but they killed every pirate. When rescue ships arrived, the surviving humans were still trying to repair their ship to continue their journey. Krell called for more assassins. Each one refused the contract after studying the human data. The reasons were always similar. Humans were too unpredictable, too willing to sacrifice everything, too likely to turn any situation into a fight to the death. Vexar, a bioweapon specialist, explained it best. Other species fight until the cost becomes too high, then they surrender or retreat. Humans seem to calculate cost differently. They measure success not by what they preserve, but by what they accomplish before they fall. By the end of the day, 17 of the guild's best assassins had refused the human contract. Krell had never seen anything like it. These were killers who had eliminated warlords, crime bosses, and even members of royal families without hesitation. Yet they all feared approaching a species that had not even discovered faster-than-light travel until recently. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Jake Murphy stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the latest fleet exercises through the transparent aluminum windows. The ships moved with practiced precision, their crews well-trained, despite humanity's relatively brief time in space. Admiral, his aide approached with a data pad. We're detecting increased scanning activity in the outer system. Long-range sensors show several unidentified vessels conducting what appears to be surveillance. Murphy nodded. Any response to our hail attempts? No, sir. They maintain distance and disappear whenever our patrol ships approach. Probably traders or explorers, Murphy said. Keep monitoring them. If they become aggressive, we'll respond. Accordingly, Colonel Lisa Bennett entered the observation deck, her expression troubled. As head of Earth's intelligence division, she had been tracking the mysterious contacts for weeks. Admiral, I don't think these are traders, she said. The scanning patterns are too sophisticated, too focused on our military installations and government facilities. Someone is studying us very carefully. For what purpose? Murphy asked. That's what worries me. They're not looking at our trade routes or resource deposits. They're mapping our defenses and identifying our leadership. This feels like preparation for something. Back in the Zarthon system, Krell faced a crisis he had never imagined. Word of the guild's refusal had spread through the criminal underworld. Other assassin organizations were declining human contracts as well. Bounty hunters were avoiding human space entirely. Even pirates had begun giving human ships a wide berth. The reputation was growing beyond the facts. Stories were spreading faster than truth, and each telling made humans seem more dangerous than the last. What had started as professional caution was becoming galactic folklore. Krell called an emergency meeting of the guild's senior leadership. The chamber filled with representatives from dozens species, all of them legendary killers in their own right. Yet when the subject of humans arose, an uncomfortable silence settled over the room. We have a problem, Krell announced. Our refusal to take human contracts is being interpreted as fear. Other organizations are following our lead. The humans are gaining a reputation as untouchable. Perhaps that is not entirely wrong, Mordeth said quietly. I have continued studying their combat footage. These humans do not fight like any species we have encountered. They adapt too quickly, sacrifice too willingly, and think too differently. You are all being foolish, Krell hissed. They are. Flesh and blood like any other species. Yes, agreed Vexar, but they are flesh and blood that refuses to accept defeat. That changes everything. The meeting broke up without resolution. For the first time in the Shadow Guild's history, they had encountered a species they collectively refused to hunt. Word of this unprecedented decision would soon reach the highest levels of galactic civilization, setting in motion events that would reshape the balance of power across the star's dot in his private chambers. Krell stared at the human contract that lay unsigned on his desk. Perhaps his assassins were right to be cautious. Perhaps there was something different about these humans that made them too dangerous to approach. Or perhaps, he thought with growing unease, it was already too late to find out. The news traveled faster than light across the galaxy. Within days, every criminal organization, mercenary company, and pirate fleet had heard the same incredible story. The Shadow Guild, the most feared assassins in known space, had refused a contract for the first time in their history. The target species was called humans. On Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Trade Council, Ambassador Chung Wei stepped off his transport ship with confidence. He carried credentials from Earth's government and trade agreements that would benefit dozens of species. Humanity was ready to join the galactic community as equals. The massive council building stretched toward the sky, its crystal walls reflecting the light of 3 suns. Chun had studied the architecture and customs of 40 different species to prepare for this moment. He expected negotiations, perhaps some skepticism about humanity's newcomer status, but nothing more. The council chamber fell silent when he entered. 200 delegates from across the galaxy turned to stare at him. Chun smiled and raised his hand in greeting, a gesture he had practiced to be as non-threatening as possible. Instead of returning the greeting, several delegates moved away. From him, honored council members, Chun began, I bring greetings from Earth and humanity's desire to join your alliance of trading worlds. Council Speaker Jorvul, a tall being with blue skin and multiple eyes, studied Chun carefully. Ambassador Chun Wei, he said slowly, we have heard stories about your species. Are they true? What stories? Chun asked, genuinely confused. That your people cannot be killed by conventional means. That you fight until your last breath, even when victory is impossible. That the Shadow Guild itself refuses to target your kind. Chun blinked in surprise. He had never heard of the Shadow Guild, but the fear in the speaker's voice was unmistakable. Around the chamber, delegates whispered to each other in dozens of languages. I think there has been some misunderstanding, Chun said. Humans are mortal like any other species. We can be reasoned with, and we prefer peaceful solutions to conflicts. Then why, asked a delegate from the back, do the Death Dealers flee at the mention of your name? Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim System's fleet, Captain Ryan Walsh was discovering just how far humanity's reputation had spread. His small convoy of merchant vessels had been traveling the trade routes for weeks, carrying Earth's first exports to alien markets. Captain, his communications officer called out, we're receiving a distress signal from a Corvani trading ship. They report pirates attacking their position. Set course to assist, Walsh ordered. All ships, battle stations. The human convoy dropped out of hyperspace to find 3 pirate vessels surrounding a damaged Corvani freighter. The pirates immediately broke off their attack and fled at maximum speed, leaving behind their prize without firing a single shot. Walsh stared at his display screen in confusion. Did they just run away from us? Sir, his tactical officer reported, those were Razorclaw pirates. They're known for never backing down from a fight. Their ships outgun ours 3-1. The Corvani captain contacted them directly, his relief obvious even through the translation software. Human vessels, we thank you for your intervention. We thought we were going to die today. We didn't do anything, Walsh replied. The pirates left on their own. Because you arrived, the Corvani captain explained. The pirates fled because they recognized your ship designs. All criminal organizations know better than to fight humans now. I don't understand. You are the species that makes death dealers. Afraid, the captain said with reverence. Your reputation has spread throughout this sector. Pirates avoid human ships, assassins refuse human contracts, and mercenaries will not accept payment to fight your kind. Back on Earth, Dr. Amy Foster was trying to make sense of similar reports from across human space. As a xenobiologist specializing in first contact protocols, she had been tasked with understanding why alien behavior toward humans seemed so unusual. Her research had led her to interview captured pirates and smugglers held in Earth's detention facilities. The stories they told were remarkable in their consistency, even though the prisoners came from different species and had been captured in different systems. The humans are not like other races, explained a Vorthic smuggler. Other species fight. Until the cost becomes too high, then they surrender. Humans calculate cost differently. They seem to measure success by how much damage they can cause, not by how much they can reserve. A Krillian pirate told her, "We attacked a human colony. Ship once. They had no weapons, just farmers and their families. When we boarded their ship, they fought us with farming tools, kitchen knives, even pieces of broken furniture. Most species would have surrendered to save their children. These humans kept fighting even after half their people were wounded." "What happened?" Amy asked. "We won eventually, but it cost us more crew than any other raid that year." Word spread quickly. No one attacks human civilians anymore. It is not worth the price. The most disturbing interview came from a captured assassin named Vexar. He belonged to a lesser guild that specialized in eliminating troublesome individuals for various governments. "I was hired to kill a human diplomat on Kepler Station," he told Amy. "Simple job, I thought. One target, minimal security, quick elimination. I spent weeks studying the target's habits and planned the perfect approach. But you didn't complete the mission?" I watched him for days before I realized something was wrong. This human diplomat noticed he was being watched. Instead of increasing his security or changing his routine, he began to set traps. He turned his daily activities into weapons against me. Amy leaned forward. "What kind of traps?" "He would enter buildings through service entrances, then wait near the exits. He started carrying improvised weapons disguised as everyday objects. He began walking routes that forced me into disadvantageous positions. By the end of the week, I realized he was not trying to avoid assassination. He was trying to draw me into a confrontation where he could kill me first." "So you abandoned the contract?" "I fled the station immediately." This diplomat had turned himself into bait for a trap I did not understand. Later, I learned this is normal human behavior. When threatened, they do not seek safety. They seek to eliminate the threat permanently. In the imperial capital of the Zephrian Empire, Emperor Vexar was growing increasingly frustrated with reports from his intelligence networks. Every attempt to gather information about human military capabilities had failed, not because humans had superior security, but because no one would accept contracts to spy on them. General Zoran, his most trusted military advisor, entered the throne room carrying datapads filled with combat analyses. The Krillian general had fought in dozens of wars and conquered systems across 2 galaxy arms. "My Emperor," Zoran said, "I have completed my review of human combat footage as you requested. And your assessment?" "They are dangerous in ways our military doctrine does not account for," the general replied carefully. "Our training teaches soldiers to preserve their lives while accomplishing objectives. Human training appears to teach soldiers to accomplish objectives regardless of personal cost." Vextar's tentacles writhed with impatience. "They are a primitive species with inferior technology." "Yes, my Emperor. But they compensate for technological inferiority with tactical unpredictability. In every engagement I studied, human forces used strategies that violated standard military logic, but proved effective anyway. The general activated a holographic display showing footage from a human military exercise. Watch this simulation, my Emperor. The human commander is outnumbered 5-1 and trapped in an indefensible position. Standard doctrine would call for surrender or withdrawal. On the display, human ships suddenly accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet, ignoring incoming fire. At the last moment, they scattered in different directions, forcing the larger fleet to divide its attention. Several human ships were destroyed, but the survivors managed to reach strategic positions and eliminated the enemy commander's flagship. They sacrificed 60% of their force to achieve victory, Zoran explained. Most species would consider this an unacceptable loss ratio. The humans celebrated it as a successful training exercise. What does this mean for our empire? Vexar asked. It means, my Emperor, that if we engage humans in combat, we must be prepared for them to accept casualties that would break the morale of any other species. They will continue fighting long after victory becomes impossible, and they will find ways to hurt us even as they die. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place in war rooms, council chambers, and criminal hideouts. Humanity had gained a reputation that exceeded reality, but that reputation was built on a foundation of truth. Humans did fight differently than other species. They did refuse to surrender when surrender seemed logical. They did turn desperate situations into opportunities for victory. The Shadow Guild's refusal to target humans had sent a message throughout the galaxy. If the most skilled killers in space considered humans too dangerous to hunt, then perhaps humanity deserved the respect that came with being genuinely feared on Earth. Admiral Murphy continued his routine duties, unaware the human reputation was reshaping galactic politics. The mysterious surveillance had stopped. Captain Steve Barnes guided his small exploration fleet toward the edge of Zephrian space with the confidence of someone who believed in peaceful first contact. His 3 ships carried diplomats, scientists, and cultural experts instead of weapons. Earth's government had sent them to establish formal relations with the Galactic Empire that controlled this region. Captain, Lieutenant Karen Rodriguez, called from her tactical station. We're detecting massive energy signatures ahead. It looks like an entire battle fleet. Barnes studied the display screen. Dozens of Zephrian warships hung in space near the system's edge, their weapons powered but not aimed. They formed a defensive wall that stretched across the likely approach routes. That's quite a welcoming committee, Barnes said. Open a channel. Sir, they're not responding to our hails, the communications officer reported. But they're not moving to intercept us either. They're just watching. What Barnes didn't know was that the Zephrian fleet commanders were paralyzed by conflicting orders and growing fear. Admiral Kethvar had been ordered to prevent human ships from entering Imperial space, but intelligence reports suggested that humans might be too dangerous to engage directly. Admiral, his tactical officer whispered, the human ships are continuing their approach. They're making no aggressive moves, but they're not slowing down either. Kethvar had read every report about human combat behavior. The stories were disturbing. Humans who fought with broken bones, who turned everyday objects into weapons, who continued attacking even when victory was impossible. His own military analysts had warned that engaging humans might result in casualties far beyond acceptable levels. Maintain position, he ordered. Do not fire unless they attack first. The human fleet passed through the Zephrian defensive line without incident. Barnes waved at the alien ships through his viewscreen, a friendly gesture that caused panic among the Zephrian crews. Several commanders interpreted the wave as a threat display and powered their shields to maximum. Meanwhile, back in the Zarthan system, The Shadow Guild was facing its first internal crisis in centuries. Younger assassins questioned the leadership's decision to avoid human contracts, viewing it as cowardice that damaged the guild's reputation. Yexmara, a hot-headed Vorthic assassin, confronted Krell in the main chamber. Guild Master, the younger members are losing respect for our traditions. They say we have become afraid of primitive apes. Then perhaps, Krell said coldly, they need to understand why we made this decision. He activated the chamber's main display system and called for all guild members to assemble. Within an hour, nearly 300 assassins filled the vast room. They represented 40 different species, each one trained in the art of death. You have questions about our refusal to accept human contracts, Krell announced. Watch and understand. A display showed footage from Luna Station, where humans had conducted a military exercise 6 months earlier. Commander Nick Taylor had been given an impossible scenario: defend the station against an overwhelming enemy force using only damaged equipment and a skeleton crew. The assassins watched in growing silence as Taylor turned the exercise into a masterpiece of improvised warfare. When his main weapons failed, he rigged the station's mining equipment to fire asteroid chunks at enemy ships. When his shields collapsed, he used the station's artificial gravity to trap enemy boarding parties in crushing force fields. Notice, Krell narrated, that Commander Taylor never considers surrender, even when the scenario makes victory impossible. Instead, he looks for ways to make his defeat costly for the enemy. The footage continued. Taylor's crew, following his example, turned maintenance tools into weapons and used the station's life support systems as tactical advantages. When enemy forces finally breached the command center, Taylor had rigged the entire section to explode, taking his attackers with him. This was a training exercise, Krell emphasized. Commander Taylor survived because it was simulation, but his willingness to die for victory was real. This is how humans think. More footage followed. Human soldiers charging into certain death to save wounded comrades. Civilian pilots ramming their ships into enemy vessels to protect evacuation transports. Medical personnel refusing to abandon patients even when their hospitals came under attack. Yexmara spoke for many of the younger assassins. They are brave, I will grant that. But bravery does not stop a blade or turn aside a poisoned dart. You miss the point, Mordith replied from the back of the chamber. Bravery can be predicted and used against an enemy. What makes humans dangerous is not their courage, but their creativity in applying that courage. The display showed a human colony under attack by raiders. The colonists had no military training and limited weapons, but they defended themselves with tactics that defied logic. They used agricultural equipment as artillery, turned their own greenhouses into explosive traps, and coordinated their defense through children carrying messages on bicycles. The raiders won eventually, Mordeth continued, but they lost more ships taking one human farming colony than they had lost in the previous 10 raids combined. Word spread quickly. No one raids human colonies anymore. Back in Zephrian space, Emperor Vexar was receiving reports that made his anger grow with each passing hour. The human ships had not only entered his territory, but were broadcasting friendly messages on open channels, inviting any interested parties to make contact for trade discussions. They mock us, he hissed to General Zoran. They ignore our authority and act as if our space belongs to them. My Emperor, the general replied carefully, perhaps we should consider their diplomatic overtures. The humans appear to be seeking peaceful contact. No, Vextar's tentacles lashed the air. 3,000 years of imperial authority will not be undermined by these primitive creatures. Prepare the fleet for a full assault on their home system. General. Zoran hesitated. My Emperor, I must advise caution. Our intelligence suggests that humans may be more formidable than they appear. You believe the story spread by cowardly assassins. I believe the combat footage I have analyzed. Human tactical doctrine is unlike anything in our military databases. They fight in ways that our training does not prepare us for. But Vexar had made his decision. Within days, the largest Zephrian battle fleet in centuries was assembled and heading toward human space. 500 warships, carrying enough firepower to destroy planets, moved through hyperspace toward Earth. On Earth, Admiral Helen Pierce received the intelligence reports with growing concern. Long-range sensors had detected the massive fleet. Movement and its destination was clear. Admiral, Colonel Bennett reported, we're looking at odds of approximately 50 to 1. Even with our defensive platforms and system patrol fleets, we cannot match their numbers. Pierce studied the tactical displays showing Earth's defenses. The planet was protected by orbital weapon platforms, asteroid mining stations that could be converted to military use, and a fleet of ships designed more for exploration than warfare. What are our assets? She asked. Lunar Station has been upgraded with the new plasma cannons. The asteroid belt mining operations could provide cover and resources. We have 47 active warships and about 200 auxiliary vessels. That could be pressed into service. Against 500 enemy ships? Yes, ma'am. Pierce nodded calmly. What the Zephrians didn't understand was that humans had been preparing for this possibility since they first encountered alien life. Not because they wanted war, but because they refused to be helpless. General Paul Graham entered the command center, followed by Colonel Rita Stone. Both officers had been reviewing human defensive strategies that had been developed specifically for fighting against superior numbers. Admiral, Graham reported, we've activated Operation Hornet's Nest. Every civilian ship captain who volunteered for emergency service has been contacted. We'll have over 800 vessels available, including cargo haulers, passenger transports, and mining ships. They're not warships, Pierce observed. No, ma'am, but they're crewed by humans who understand what surrender means for their families. Colonel Stone added, Captain Tony Martinez has already submitted a tactical plan for using civilian ships as force multipliers. Martinez's plan was typically human in its approach. Instead of trying to match the enemy's firepower, he proposed using speed, surprise, and the willingness to take casualties to maximum effect. Civilian ships would be loaded with improvised explosives and used as guided missiles. Mining vessels would dump their cargo loads into the enemy's path. Even passenger liners would participate by acting as decoys and rescue ships. The plan relied on one fundamental assumption about human nature, that people would rather die fighting for their home than live as slaves to an empire. Back in Zephrian space, Admiral Kethver received updates on human defensive preparations with growing unease. Instead of massing their forces for a conventional battle, the humans appeared to be dispersing throughout their system. Their civilian population was not evacuating to safety, but instead taking positions to support the military effort. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we're detecting unusual activity throughout the human system. Civilian vessels are being retrofitted with what appears to be military hardware. The Battle of Sol lasted 18 hours and changed galactic history forever. When Admiral Kethvar's massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, they expected to face a desperate last stand from humanity's small navy. Instead, they encountered something no military doctrine had prepared them for. Captain Tony Martinez commanded the first wave of human defenders, leading a mixed force of military vessels and converted civilian ships. As the Zephrian fleet advanced in perfect formation, Martinez did something that violated every rule of space combat. He ordered his ships to scatter in seemingly random directions, then regroup in clusters that made no tactical sense. Sir, his tactical officer called out, the enemy is trying to form an engagement line. They're expecting us to meet them head-on. Then let's disappoint them, Martinez replied. All ships execute pattern Chaos 7. The human ships suddenly accelerated at maximum velocity toward different sections of the Zephrian fleet. Some aimed for the heavily armored command vessels, others targeted support ships, and a few headed straight for the enemy formation center. None of them followed predictable attack patterns. Admiral Kethvar watched in confusion as human ships began, ramming his vessels instead of engaging in proper combat. A converted cargo hauler, loaded with mining explosives, smashed into his flagship's escort and detonated with the force of a small star. A passenger liner accelerated past his defensive screen and released hundreds of escape pods, each one programmed to home in on Zephrian ships and explode on contact. What are they doing? Kethvar demanded. This is not how space battles are fought. His tactical officer studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. Sir, they appear to be using their entire civilian fleet as weapons. Each ship is programmed for a suicide attack against specific targets. The battle quickly became a nightmare for the Zephrian forces. Every time they destroyed a human ship, debris from the explosion would damage nearby vessels. Human crews would continue fighting even after their ships were critically damaged, using emergency thrusters to ram into enemy vessels. Mining ships would dump their entire cargo loads into space, creating fields of obstacles that disrupted Zephrian formations. But the most disturbing aspect of the battle was the human communications. Instead of panic or despair, the Zephrians intercepted messages of encouragement, tactical updates, and even jokes shared between crews facing certain death. Zephrian fleet, this is Captain Sarah Davis of the merchant vessel Lucky Strike. Came one transmission. You've damaged our engines and killed half my crew, but we're still coming for you. Davis out. The Lucky Strike, a converted freighter with makeshift armor, continued its attack run despite massive damage. When its weapons failed, the crew rigged the ship's reactor to overload and used the explosion to take out 2 Zephrian destroyers. General Paul Graham coordinated the defense from Luna Station, using tactics that seemed designed to maximize confusion rather than achieve military objectives. He divided the human forces into small groups that attacked from unexpected angles, retreated when they should advance, and advanced when retreat seemed logical. All units, remember the Alamo Protocol, Graham announced on the command frequency. Make every shot count. Make every loss hurt them more than it hurts us. Colonel Rita Stone led a squadron of retrofitted mining vessels against the Zephrian fleet's left flank. Her ships had been equipped with industrial cutting lasers and asteroid-moving tractors beams, neither designed for combat but both effective at close range. Colonel, one of her pilots reported, my ship is venting atmosphere and my weapons are offline. Requesting permission to withdraw. Negative, Stone replied calmly. Use your tractor beam to grab some asteroid debris and ram it into the nearest enemy ship. We're not done fighting until we stop breathing. The pilot followed orders, using his damaged mining vessel to grab a chunk of rock and accelerate it into a Zephrian cruiser. The impact caused both vessels to explode, but the debris field forced 3 other enemy ships to alter course and break formation. Admiral Kethvar found himself losing ships at an alarming rate, not because the humans had superior weapons, but because they fought in ways that made every victory costly. His fleet's overwhelming numerical advantage was being eroded by tactics that treated death as just another tool to achieve victory. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender requests from our own ships. Several. Captains are requesting permission to withdraw from combat. Denied, Kethvar snarled. We outnumber them 5-1. Yes, sir, but we've lost 47 ships, and they've only lost 23. At this rate of exchange, they'll destroy our entire fleet before we eliminate their defenders. The truth was even worse than the numbers suggested. The human losses were almost entirely civilian volunteers, while Zephrian casualties included some of the Empire's best military vessels. Every human ship destroyed took at least one Zephrian vessel with it, and often damaged several others. Captain Martinez, now commanding his third ship after the first two had been destroyed, contacted Admiral Pierce on Earth. "Admiral, we've broken their main formation and scattered their fleet across the system. Recommend we begin Phase 2. Phase 2 of the Human Defense Plan was even more unconventional than the initial attack. Instead of trying to destroy the remaining Zephrian ships, the humans began herding them toward specific locations where prepared traps waited. Mining stations throughout the asteroid belt activated hidden weapon systems. Cargo containers that had been floating in space for weeks suddenly came alive with targeting systems and missile launchers. Even the planet Mars had been prepared as a weapon, with its orbital platforms ready to create a devastating crossfire. Admiral Cathfor realized with growing horror that the entire human system had been turned into a trap. Every piece of civilian infrastructure, every mining station, every orbital platform had been prepared to fight. The humans hadn't just been defending their home system. They had turned it into the galaxy's largest weapons platform. "All ships," he finally ordered, "withdraw to minimum safe distance. Cease hostilities immediately." The surviving Zephrian vessels retreated to the edge of the system, having lost nearly 2/3 of their fleet to an enemy they had expected to crush easily. The humans did not pursue, but they did continue broadcasting messages that chilled Cathfor to his core. "Zephrian fleet, this is Admiral Pierce of Earth Defense Command. You are welcome to try again anytime you like. We'll be waiting." The news of the Zephrian defeat spread across the galaxy within days. The empire that had ruled 3-star systems for millennia had been humiliated by a species that barely qualified as a spacefaring civilization. Worse, the humans had not just won. They had made victory look easy. Emperor Vexar received the battle reports in his throne room, surrounded by advisors who could barely believe what they were reading. His greatest military fleet had been destroyed by converted civilian ships and improvised weapons. "My Emperor," General Zoran reported carefully, "the defeat was complete. Admiral Cathfor requests permission to withdraw all remaining forces from human space." "Granted," Vexar said quietly. A fight had gone out of him. For the first time in his reign, he faced the possibility that his empire might not be invincible, but the damage went far beyond military losses. News of the human victory had reached every corner of Zephrian space, and subject species were beginning to question imperial authority. If humans could defeat the Empire's greatest fleet, perhaps the Zephrians were not as powerful as they claimed. Rebellion broke out on 6 worlds within a week. Colonial governors found themselves facing uprisings inspired by human tactics, with civilians using improvised weapons and refusing to surrender, even when faced with overwhelming force. On Kepler 7, a mining colony declared independence and used their industrial equipment to fight off imperial peacekeepers. On Vega Prime, dock workers went on strike and turned the orbital shipyards into fortresses. Each rebellion used lessons learned from studying the Battle of Sol. Ambassador Susan Clark, still waiting on Nexus Prime for humanity's admission to the Galactic Trade Council, found herself at the center of a political storm. Species that had once feared humans now sought their protection. Alliance requests arrived daily from worlds looking for human military advisors or defensive partnerships. Ambassador Clark, Council Speaker Jorval, approached her after an emergency. "Session, your species has accomplished something remarkable. You have shown that the Zephrian Empire can be defeated." "We defended ourselves," Clark replied. "Nothing more." "Perhaps, but your defense has given hope to dozens of oppressed worlds. They are asking if humanity would be willing to help them achieve their own freedom." Defense Secretary Greg Turner, back on Earth, was dealing with similar requests through official diplomatic channels. Every day brought new offers of alliance, trade agreements, and requests for military assistance. Humanity had become the most sought-after ally in the galaxy overnight. Intelligence officer Major Dan Cooper presented his latest analysis to Earth's leadership. "Sir, our reputation has exceeded all realistic bounds. Some species now believe we're capable of feats that violate known physics." The sight of Emperor Vexar's ship approaching Earth shocked every human who saw it. The massive imperial vessel, designed to inspire fear and awe across the galaxy, now flew with only a minimal escort through human space. Its weapons were powered down, its shields lowered, and its communication systems broadcasting continuous surrender signals. President Rachel Adams stood in the Oval Office, staring at the live feed from space with disbelief. Secretary of State Matt Johnson stood beside her, equally stunned by what they were witnessing. "Madam President," Johnson said quietly, "in 3,000 years of galactic history, no Zephrian emperor has ever left his home system to negotiate with another species. They always demanded that others come to them. And now he's coming here," Adams replied, "to surrender." The words still felt strange to her. Humanity had been preparing for a long war against a galactic empire, expecting to fight for decades, just to maintain their independence. Instead, they had won everything in a single battle that lasted less than a day. Fleet Commander Jake Murphy, recently promoted after Admiral Pierce's retirement, contacted Earth from his flagship. "Madam President, the Emperor's ship is requesting permission to enter Earth orbit. They're asking for safe passage and diplomatic immunity." "Granted," Adams said. "And Jake, make sure our people understand that this is a surrender negotiation, not a peace conference. We're not equals meeting to discuss terms. They're coming here to ask for mercy." The difference was important. In galactic politics, peace conferences implied mutual respect between powers. Surrender negotiations meant one side was completely defeated and begging for survival. Emperor Vexar's shuttle landed at Andrews Space Base under heavy security. The Emperor himself was a sight that would have been unimaginable weeks earlier. The being who had ruled half a galaxy now walked slowly, his tentacles drooping with exhaustion and defeat. His once brilliant robes were simple and dark, chosen to show humility rather than power. Diplomat Beverly Hayes led the human negotiation team, supported by military strategist General Frank Lewis. They had spent days preparing for talks that would reshape galactic civilization. "Your Imperial Majesty," Hayes said as Vexar entered the conference room, "welcome to Earth." "Thank you," Vexar replied in heavily accented English, a language he had learned specifically for this meeting. "I have come to discuss terms for my empire's surrender." The directness surprised the human diplomats. They had expected elaborate ceremonies and face-saving measures. Instead, the Emperor was treating this like a business transaction where he needed to minimize his losses. "What are you offering?" General Lewis asked. "Complete withdrawal from all human territories and star systems," Vexar said immediately. "Recognition of human sovereignty over any space you choose to claim. Trade agreements favorable to human interests. And most importantly, a promise that the Zephrian Empire will never again threaten human civilization." "In exchange for what?" Hayes asked. "A promise that humans will not seek revenge against my people." The room fell silent. President Adams, who had been listening through a secure connection, spoke through the conference speakers. "Your Majesty, we were not planning to seek revenge. We simply wanted to be left alone." "With respect, Madam President," Vexar replied, "your species has already begun taking revenge, though you may not realize it." "Explain." "News of your victory has spread throughout my empire. Worlds that have been under imperial control for centuries are now rebelling, using tactics they learned from studying your defense of Earth. My military forces are stretched thin trying to contain uprisings on 17 different planets. General Lewis leaned forward. And you think we're responsible for these rebellions? You are responsible for giving them hope, Vexar said. Before the Battle of Sol, no one believed the Zephrian Empire could be defeated. Your victory proved that our military was not invincible. Every oppressed world in my empire now believes they can win their freedom if they fight like humans do. The truth was more complex than Vexar was admitting. The rebellions were not just inspired by human tactics. They were directly supported by human advisors. After the battle, dozens of retired human military officers had quietly traveled to rebellious worlds, offering their expertise to freedom fighters. What exactly are you asking for? Hayes inquired. I am asking for humanity to announce that you have no territorial ambitions beyond your current space. I need you to state publicly that you will not interfere in internal imperial affairs. And I need you to stop providing military advice to rebel worlds. President Adams spoke again. Your Majesty, we cannot control what individual humans choose to do with their time. If retired military officers want to travel and offer their services, that is their right as free citizens. Then my empire will continue to fragment, Vexar said with resignation. Every world that achieves independence will inspire others to try. Within a decade, the Zephrian Empire will cease to exist. Perhaps that would not be such a bad thing, General Lewis suggested. Vexar's tentacles writhed with agitation. General, you do not understand the consequences. The Zephrian Empire has maintained peace and order across 3-star systems for millennia. Without imperial authority, these regions will descend into chaos. Wars will break out between species, trade. Routes will become unsafe, and millions will die in conflicts that serve no purpose. Beverly Hayes studied the Emperor carefully. What are you proposing as an alternative? Transform the Empire into a voluntary confederation. Allow member worlds to govern themselves while maintaining mutual defense agreements and trade relationships. Keep the infrastructure that provides stability, but remove the oppression that breeds rebellion. And you would agree to this? I would prefer it to watching my empire tear itself apart, Vexar admitted. But I need human support to make the transition work. If humanity endorses the new confederation and promises not to support further rebellions, other worlds might accept the change peacefully. President Adams consulted with her advisors for several hours before responding. The decision they faced would determine the future of galactic civilization. Your Majesty, she finally said, we agree to your proposal with conditions. The Confederation must include genuine democratic representation for all member worlds. Any species that wants independence must be allowed to leave peacefully, and humans must be granted equal status in all Confederation institutions. Agreed, Vexar said immediately. Furthermore, Adams continued, we want formal recognition that humanity's defensive actions were justified responses to imperial aggression. A historical record must show that we did not start this conflict. Also agreed, General Lewis added the final condition. The Shadow Guild and all other imperial assassination organizations must be disbanded permanently. If this confederation is to be based on voluntary cooperation, it cannot maintain organizations dedicated to eliminating troublesome individuals. Vexar hesitated. The Shadow Guild has already disbanded itself. After their refusal to target humans, they lost all credibility in the galactic underworld. Guildmaster Krell has requested permission to reform his organization as an intelligence service for the new confederation. Under human oversight, Hayes stipulated, if necessary. The negotiations continued for 3 days, working out details that would reshape galactic politics. The most significant agreement was the establishment of human military bases in key systems, officially described as Confederation defense stations, but understood by everyone as guarantees that the new government would not revert to imperial oppression. Commander Lucas Green was selected to establish the first human diplomatic mission on the former imperial capital. His appointment symbolized a complete reversal of galactic power structures. Less than 2 months earlier, humans had been unknown primitives on the edge of civilized space. Now they were the guarantors of galactic peace. The signing ceremony took place on Earth, broadcast live throughout the galaxy. Emperor Vexar, now titled First Speaker of the Galactic Confederation, formally transferred authority to a council that included representatives from dozens of worlds. Dr. Amy Foster, who had spent months studying alien psychology, was asked to document the historical significance of the moment. Her report would become required reading in diplomatic schools throughout the galaxy. The transformation of the Zephrian Empire into the Galactic Confederation represents more than a change in government, she wrote. It demonstrates that reputation can be more powerful than weapons, and that the fear of fighting someone can be more effective than actually fighting them. The Shadow Guild, now reformed as the Confederation Intelligence Service, was headquartered on a station jointly operated by humans and former Imperial forces. Krell, once the galaxy's most feared assassin master, now worked alongside human intelligence officers to maintain stability through information rather than assassination. The humans taught us something we had never considered, Krell explained to his new staff. Sometimes the threat of violence is more effective than violence itself. By becoming too dangerous to fight, they achieved what no amount of actual fighting could have accomplished. 6 months after Emperor Vexar's surrender, Captain Steve Barnes commanded the first joint exploration mission into uncharted space.